What's up everyone and welcome back to the World History Channel. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button today. Let's get started. Bloody Mary is remembered as a murderer, but the rest of her family was far worse. Here's no two ways about it. Queen Mary I of England has a bad reputation. Known as Bloody Mary, Queen Mary's reign is associated with brutality, murder, and religious fervor. But does she truly deserve the nickname Bloody Mary? Especially when you take into account the actions of her father, Henry VIII, and the number of people that died during her brother, Edward VI's reign. Queen Mary's death toll pales in comparison to the thousands of people Henry VIII was said to have killed, some in the most gruesome ways possible. Yet Mary is the one who's called bloody. Let's find out why. Mary Tudor was raised amid her father's lady problems. Mary Tudor was the daughter of Henry VIII and his first wife, Catherine of Aragon. Her father was a little disappointed that she was a girl, but she turned out to be an intelligent and skilled child. At the age of 9, Henry VIII made her Princess of Wales and sent her to live along the Welsh border while he tried to find her a husband. She was baptized Catholic at birth and became a fervent believer, which, after her father broke from the church, put her in a difficult position both politically and religiously. Mary had to compromise her beliefs to be an heir to the English throne. When Henry VIII declared his marriage to Catherine of Aragon null and void, Mary was officially deemed a bastard. After Anne Boleyn gave birth to her own daughter, Elizabeth, she had Mary declared illegitimate, knocking her out of the line of succession. This was just one of the many grievances Mary would bear towards her stepmother, reviling her long after she was executed by Henry. Once Anne was dramatically and violently removed from court and her father married Jane Seymour. He reinstated Mary but only after she acknowledged him as head of the Church of England. For Mary, as a devout Catholic, this was a bitter pill to swallow. Mary became queen after her brother's death and the reign of a 9-day interloper. In 1553, Mary Tudor succeeded her brother Edward VI as king. Edward VI became king when his father died in 1547, but he was only 10 years old. Regents ruled in his stead, and when he died, a religious power struggle broke out. Catholic factions favored Mary while Protestants called for Elizabeth to be queen. There was a brief interlude during which their royal cousin, Lady Jane Grey, was made queen by Edward VI's former regents, but after 9 days she was arrested and later executed, and Mary took the throne. The public enthusiastically welcomed Mary to the throne. The English people greeted Queen Mary with enthusiasm and cheers. According to sources, the number of caps that were thrown up at the proclamation are not to be told. Money was thrown out at windows for joy. The bonfires were without number, and ringing of bells, besides banquetings and singing in the streets for joy. Mary represented a return to order and, from Mary's perspective, a return to Catholicism. Mary took her popularity to mean all her subjects wanted to be Catholic like her. Despite everything that had happened to her, Mary was a staunch Catholic. During her father's and brother's reigns, Catholicism had been forced underground, but Mary never stopped attending Mass and feeling as though she had committed religious treason by acknowledging them as the head of the Church of England. The enthusiasm that surrounded her accession to the throne was, to Mary, an endorsement of her desire to restore England to a Catholic country. Mary set out to do just that. She married the Catholic King of Spain, Philip II, in 1554, to strengthen her cause. This would also, hopefully, produce an heir, which would prevent her sister, the Protestant Elizabeth, from taking the throne. She repealed Henry VIII and Edward VI religious laws, passing her own, and in 1555, she passed heresy laws that forbade the practice of Protestantism in England. Mary was in tight with the Spanish, which wasn't appreciated in England. Mary's marriage to Philip II didn't go over well in England. The Spanish and the English were rivals at sea and in trade, and there was fear about a foreigner being let into the British royal family. In 1554, 3,000 Englishmen, led by Thomas Wyatt, staged a protest against the marriage, marching from Rochester to London. The rebellion was short-lived and Wyatt's movement was put down by royal troops. Wyatt was executed for treason, but his actions reflected larger sentiments of the time. Philip had also convinced Mary to support the Spanish in their war with France. This led to the loss of Calais in 1558, the lone English possession on the continent, an utter failure in foreign policy on Mary's part. Mary's laws against Protestantism led to hundreds of executions. Mary's religious policies reflected her desire to drive Protestantism out of England. Heretics were to be punished, although she pronounced that it should be done without rashness, not leaving in the meantime to do justice, such as by learning it would seem to deceive the simple, and the rest so to be used that the people might well perceive them not to be condemned without just occasion. She was advocating for education and reteaching Catholicism in theory, but there were hundreds of just occasions as well. According to sources, 284 Protestants were burned at the stake during her reign, which created fear, outrage, and would ultimately earn her the nickname Bloody Mary. The Protestants themselves, men like John Rogers, the first person to be burned at the stake during Mary's reign, became martyrs. Mary executed 300 people, but Edward VI killed over 5,000. What might be most shocking about the damage these executions did to Mary's reputation, the almost 300 people Mary killed in her efforts to stamp out Protestantism pale in comparison to the deaths that occurred during her brother's reign. During the Prayer Book Rebellion of 1549, for example, more than 5,500 people died after they were told to change their religious practice. The Prayer Book Rebellion resulted from Thomas Cranmer's issuance of the Book of Common Prayer, which included aspects of Catholic tradition and Protestant practice and was supposed to unify religious practice in England. It made both sides unhappy and served as a symbol of religious discontent in the country. There was discontent over taxation that added to the unrest, and in the end, over 8,000 royal troops were sent to Devon to suppress the rebellion. In the ensuing chaos, thousands died, either in skirmishes or by execution. Queen Mary I of England, often remembered as Bloody Mary, is frequently depicted as a ruthless monarch due to her persecution of Protestants during her reign. However, when examining the actions of her father, Henry VIII, and her brother, Edward VI, it becomes evident that their reigns were marked by far more severe and widespread brutality, overshadowing Mary's actions in comparison. Henry VIII, the Tyrant King. Henry VIII's reign, 1509 to 1547, is infamous for its violent suppression of dissent and the establishment of the Church of England. Estimates suggest that up to 72,000 people were executed during his 36-year rule, many for offences such as heresy, treason, and denying his royal supremacy as head of the Church of England. Executions and brutality. Henry VIII's methods of execution were particularly gruesome. Nobles and traitors were often executed by beheading, while commoners faced hanging, drawing, and quartering. Heretics were burned at the stake, a method that became a symbol of the era's religious intolerance. Political repression. Beyond executions, Henry VIII's regime was characterized by political repression. He eliminated rivals and dissenters through executions and imprisonments, consolidating his power and instilling fear throughout the kingdom. Edward VI, the Boy King and religious persecution. Edward VI, Henry VIII's only legitimate male heir, ascended to the throne in 1547 at the age of 9. His reign, though short-lived, was marked by significant religious upheaval. Edward's regents, particularly the Duke of Somerset and later the Duke of Northumberland, implemented aggressive Protestant reforms that led to widespread persecution of Catholics and those opposing the new religious order. Encyclopaedia Britannica. Suppression of Catholicism. Under Edward VI's rule, Catholic practices were systematically dismantled. Catholic clergy were removed from their positions, and Catholic rituals were banned. Resistance to these changes was met with harsh penalties, including execution. The Prayer Book Rebellion of 1549, a protest against the imposition of the Book of Common Prayer, resulted in the execution of several rebels, reflecting the regime's intolerance towards religious dissent. Political turmoil. Edward's death in 1553 at the age of 15 led to a brief and tumultuous succession crisis. His attempt to exclude his half-sisters Mary and Elizabeth from the throne in favor of Lady Jane Grey failed, leading to Mary's ascension. The political instability during Edward's reign contributed to the subsequent religious conflicts and executions during Mary's rule. Encyclopaedia Britannica. Mary I, the Catholic monarch. Mary I, daughter of Henry VIII and Catherine of Aragon, became queen in 1553. Her reign is most remembered for the Marian persecutions, during which approximately 284 Protestants were executed by burning at the stake. These actions were driven by her desire to restore Catholicism in England. Religious persecution. Mary's enforcement of Catholic orthodoxy led to the execution of prominent Protestant figures, earning her the epithet Bloody Mary. However, compared to the actions of her predecessors, the scale and scope of her persecutions were relatively limited. Political context. Mary's marriage to Philip II of Spain in 1554 was unpopular and contributed to widespread unrest. The loss of Calais to France in 1558 further tarnished her reign. Despite these challenges, Mary's religious policies were consistent with the broader European context of religious conflict during the period. Comparative analysis. When comparing the reigns of Henry VIII, Edward VI, and Mary I, it becomes clear that Henry VIII and Edward VI's actions resulted in far more extensive and severe consequences than Mary's. Henry's establishment of the Church of England and subsequent executions created a legacy of religious and political turmoil. Edward's aggressive Protestant reforms led to significant persecution of Catholics and political instability. In contrast, Mary's reign, while marked by religious persecution, was less impactful in terms of the number of executions and the long-term effects on English society. Conclusion. Stories from history that emphasize her religious persecutions have shaped the legacy of Bloody Mary. However, a closer examination reveals that her father and brother were responsible for far more extensive and brutal actions during their reigns. Understanding this context is crucial in reassessing Mary's historical reputation and recognizing the broader patterns of religious and political conflict in Tudor England. Henry VIII killed thousands of people according to some sources. Even more people died during Henry VIII's reign, including several of his wives. The estimates for executions while Henry VIII was king vary from 57,000 to 72,000 people, but the exact number will never be known. There's no doubt that Henry VIII had his rivals and enemies, real or perceived, assassinated. Thomas More, one of his closest advisors, perished because they opposed his royal supremacy, and his laws against heresy led to widespread persecution. Mary's odd behavior didn't help the overall perception of her reign. Mary promised the English people an heir over and over again. She announced a pregnancy in 1555 but was experiencing one of her many phantom pregnancies. In 1557, she again thought she was pregnant but in reality was probably suffering from stomach cancer. She had been desperate to produce an heir and was never able to do so, ultimately having to acknowledge her sister as her successor in the days leading up to her death. Her Spanish marriage and persecution of Catholics didn't produce the ongoing Catholic England she had hoped for. She already had the nickname Bloody Mary by the 17th century. Mary was vilified by her contemporaries, notably John Knox in the first blast of the trumpet against the monstrous regiment of women, which attacked female monarchs. According to Knox, it is a thing most repugnant to nature that women rule and govern over men. Knox, a Protestant, had even more reason to dislike Mary, given her fervent support of Catholicism. He went further with Mary though, calling her unworthy by reason of her bloody tyranny of the name of a woman. Overall, Queen Mary was portrayed as a bad queen, a failure in domestic and foreign policy, and ultimately unsuccessful in restoring Catholicism. Her efforts, resulting in the deaths of almost 300 people, were for naught. She's overshadowed by the reign of her sister, who came to the throne when Mary died in 1558, and is remembered for ushering in a golden age for England. By the numbers, Mary looks anything but bloody. If you do the math, Mary was pretty kind compared to her father and brother. Dividing the number of people killed by the years of the reigns leads to Henry VIII killing an average of 1946 people during each of his 37 years. Edward VI's 6-year reign had 917 deaths per year, while Mary only had 58 during each of her 5 years. Out of the three of them, she was certainly the least bloody. The death of a president is always a big deal, whether it is unexpected, such as John F. Kennedy's assassination, or predictable, like Ronald Reagan's death after suffering from Alzheimer's disease for 10 years. While former presidents always get the full memorial monty, the death of a sitting president can cause political upheaval as the successor takes the reins. But just how many U.S. presidents have died? Sure, you probably have a rough idea, but do you know the circumstances of their deaths and the legacy they left behind? Looking to the past is crucial to understanding the present. And knowing how all the U.S. presidents died, especially the ones that died in office, can shed some light on our current political situation. In total, 39 U.S. presidents have passed on. Keep reading to learn about all the U.S. president deaths that have happened since the inception of our country.